Plumber, ma'am.
I don't need a plumber. You're that clever shark, aren't you?
Candygram.
Candygram my foot. You get out of here before I call the police. You're the shark and you know it.
Wait,
Alshark.
Well, okay.
Welcome back to PC-98 Paradise, the series where we take a close look at classic games for the NEC PC-98, the most popular Japanese PC series of the early 1990s. Today we're looking at Alshark, a space-themed RPG which was released for 5 different systems. I'd long been familiar with this one, but never got around to playing any version for more than a few moments. We'll change that today. And just who made this game? Right Stuff. They made my favorite PC Engine fighting game. And I don't know what they're known for. The only game they made that was released in North America was Sid Mead's Terraforming. Right Stuff was formed in 1990, most notably from staff who worked at Glodia on games like Emerald Dragon. Alshark was their first game, and in fact Alshark's main designer and writer, Atsushi E, was also the scenario writer for Emerald Dragon. And some of you with a keen eye may have already noticed that Alshark and Emerald Dragon share the same character designer, Akihiro Kimura. So in many ways, Alshark can be summed up as Emerald Dragon in space! But does that fully describe the game? Let's find out. So here's the very first version of Alshark, which was released for the PC-98 in 1991. No screenshots on the back. That's reassuring. Inside, there's a Right Stuff sticker that was used to seal the case shut. Here's a warranty card. And a Right Stuff members card. Registering this would get you Right Stuff's free newsletter and a chance to win Right Stuff goods. And the operating manual. This explains how to start and play the game. This second booklet is in color and contains profiles for each of the characters, as well as some messages from the staff. And I don't know what this is for, actually. The game comes on 5 floppy disks, which consist of the opening disk, system disk, data disk, visual disk, and ending disk. There's no hard drive support, so to start the game we simply boot the opening disk. Oh man, this opening is so good. Even back in my early days of PC-98 collecting, I used to boot up this game just to watch the opening. I mean, this music. The entire soundtrack was composed by our old friend Tenpei Sato. Games where Sato was a sub-composer have appeared on the channel already, but this is the first game I've covered where he was the sole composer. Some of you may know him best nowadays for the Disc Gaia series. But anyway, the music in this game is generally pretty good, especially this opening, which contains a couple of themes used throughout the game. Due to the era the game was released, it's no surprise that it only uses the old monaural FM soundboard, and the particular bangy, clangy sound this game has is not for everyone, but I love it. Most people will probably prefer the more refined sound in the ports, but this was the first version of the opening I'd ever seen, and the one I'm most familiar with. So for me, there's just no substitute. But if you're wondering who all these characters are, don't worry, we'll get to that. The opening repeats until you press a button. Then you're asked to replace the opening disc with the system disc, and also the data disc in Drive 2. Unfortunately, you have to boot the game from the opening disc every time. Or maybe that's fortunate actually, since the opening never gets old. But let's select Start a New Game. Our game begins, in classic RPG fashion, in a small town where our young protagonist lives. His father announces to his mother that he is off to investigate the meteorite which landed nearby yesterday. And immediately after, we're given control of our protagonist, Shion Asmarn. You can call him Scion if you want, but I'm just going to pronounce it the way it's pronounced in Japanese, since that just feels right to me. Anyway, let's quickly format a user disk by selecting System, UD Format, and then inserting a blank disk in Drive 2. Once that's done, let's go find Shion's close friend he grew up with, Shoko Penrose. Shoko's father is a famous physicist, who has also gone off to investigate the meteorite with Shion's father. Shion and Shoko are curious about the meteorite too, so they decide to go and investigate for themselves, even though they were told not to. Exploring the town, we can find a few items hidden here and there. You may have noticed that Shion and Shoko are walking around pretty quickly, and maybe you're thinking that my PC-98 is running the game too fast. In fact, if you watch videos of the game running on more period-accurate machines, you'll find a somewhat slower and more bumpy experience. Still, I can tell that the game is properly limiting the speed here on my machine. If it were just letting the CPU rip as fast as it can go, I guarantee you the game would be so fast it would be unplayable. It's more like they future-proofed this game so that it would run fast and smooth someday on machines that didn't exist yet at the time. It's okay if you think this is wrong, but I really like the way the game runs here, and I'm not going to use ER cache this time to try and slow it down. On the main overworld, I'll go ahead and save my game. Unfortunately, unlike Emerald Dragon, you don't get any save slots on the system disk, and have to insert the user disk every time you save, which is a bit of a bummer because, like Emerald Dragon, it's game over if so much as even one character dies, so you're going to have to save often. After you save, one weird thing the game does is completely refresh the game state, like it's loading the file you just saved. I have no idea why it needs to do this, but it's annoying. At the beginning, we're going to want to do a little bit of leveling, which is a good opportunity to become familiar with the battle system. This might look kind of similar to Emerald Dragon at first glance, but it's completely different. Here, rather than moving your characters around, you have a more traditional battle system where you just select your actions and the characters always return to their home positions at the bottom of the screen. The only character you can control, though, is Shion. Why Glodia and Right Stuff love only allowing you to control your main character, I have no idea. When selecting enemies, you move this cursor freely around the screen. It's a little weird, but it works. Keep in mind, this game doesn't use the mouse. In fact, one cool thing about this game is that it's completely playable with the gamepad. You don't even need a keyboard plugged in. It's been far too long since the last PC-98 Paradise where I didn't need to use either the keyboard emulator or ER cache. That alone puts Alshark on my good list. Once you've leveled up a bit, you can move on to the canyon where the meteorite crashed, the first dungeon of the game. I managed to find my way through these early dungeons okay on my own, but later in the game I did end up using maps, since some of the dungeons and even the overworlds can get pretty ridiculous. I wouldn't say though that the game requires a walkthrough beyond that, since it's actually pretty good about making sure you know what you need to do next, via the discussion command in the menu. It's similar to the one in Emerald Dragon, except here you choose which specific party member you want to talk to, and it's a bit less visually stimulating, lacking the character portraits and varied facial expressions of Emerald Dragon. Here, if you manage to eventually find your way to the clearing in the center, you're asked to insert the opening disc to watch the game's first cutscene. The cutscenes are all quite well done, but Alshark doesn't have as many as Emerald Dragon. Shion and Shoko observe the meteorite crash site from afar, where they see a ship from the Zolius Empire, and Shion and Shoko's father is being held at gunpoint. Shoko thinks they should try to help, but Shion decides it's wiser to stay quiet and avoid being captured themselves. Just then, Shion's father and the others make their move and attack the Zolian soldiers. Shoko's dad grabs a gun from a downed soldier, but just as he does, there's a huge flash of light and he cries out in pain. When he's done, he looks around at his body, saying, "Yes, this will do." Then he says, "Kill them." and some of the Zolian soldiers fire on Shion's dad and the others, including even one of the Zolians. They then climb into the Zolian ship as Shoko's dad says, "Hurry, Alshark can't have gone far," and I think it looks hilarious when they blow up the investigative team's hovercraft for good measure as they leave. So we're left with Shion's father and the bodies of a Zolian and 2 humans on the ground. Shion's father knows that he's dying, and tells Shion and Shoko to seek out a man named Scrap Joe. He doesn't know what's gotten into Shoko's father, but in his last words he manages to say that they are looking for something called Alshark. Shion and Shoko get back to town, only to hear that Shion's mother left suddenly while they were gone, as if in a daze, without saying anything. The party is joined by the family housekeeper robot, Cal, and they set off to find Shion's mom, as well as Scrap Joe, who Shion does remember meeting as a child. They find the spaceport and another town. Here we can buy our first machine gun type weapon. Now we're talking. This gun fires out a random flurry of bullets, which hit not only the enemy you've selected, but sometimes other enemies behind or nearby. Alshark is unique in that it uses what I'd call a collision-based battle system, where shots will hit anything they make contact with. If you try to hit one of the enemies in back, your shots will likely hit one of the enemies in front of it instead. This applies to enemy shots aimed at your party as well, though, so you have to keep that in mind and place low defense characters in back. Even with melee weapons, if your character's path will make them collide with an enemy in front, they'll attack them instead of the character in back that you selected. One cool thing that you can do later in the game, however, is dual-wield melee weapons and have Shion attack both the front and back enemy with each weapon. So Alshark actually has a really cool battle system that remains fun and interesting throughout the game. The HP and MP system is kind of confusing though. HP in this game is for some reason called PP, and Shion's special techniques actually drain PP instead of MP.
Hey you little pisher! I'm talking to you!
Oh no, what is that?
Hey, you're supposed to give me some pee-pee! Where's that pee-pee? We're talking about pee-pee here! I need that pee-pee!
Oh no, Mr. Toilet Man!
And while MP sounds totally straightforward, it's actually a worthless number that has no business being permanently displayed on the HUD. Supposedly it determines the effectiveness of your special techniques, but you won't notice any difference. Especially confusing is Shoko's healing spell, which can only be used once, and then recharges as you walk around. You won't know whether it's ready or not until you try to use it. But back to the story. The party navigates through this scrap heap dungeon to find Joe's home. At first Joe doesn't remember Shion, since it's been so long, and he and Shoko are now 18. But when Shion mentions his father's name, Joe remembers the young boy he used to make toys for from scrap. When Shion explains what's happened to their parents, of course Joe agrees to join the party and help find Shion's mother. One good place to get information is at the underground bars in each town. Here Joe learns that Shion's mother was seen at the spaceport, headed for the planet Mars. Now, this is a fictional planet named Mars, not to be confused with the real-life planet Mars. Mars is the planet where the humans in this game come from, so the humans are Martians, but I think I'll just continue to refer to them as the humans to make this video less confusing. At the spaceport, there's a huge queue for the last ship to Mars before the next one leaves in 3 days. Scrap Joe suggests that they take his spaceship instead. That's right, he explains that he has a spaceship, but it's not finished and he didn't really want to use it yet, but he'll have to make do. Hidden inside another cave dungeon is Joe's ship, the Scrap 2. But Shoko says that stupid name will never do, and instead names the ship the Atlaya, which everyone agrees sounds like a cool name. Now, the Atlaya isn't like other ships, it's an Atlaya. Sorry, I apologize for that dad joke. When they take off, instead of getting to fly the ship, we're taken into a long scene where the party finds and boards a civilian ship being commandeered by Shoko's dad. This whole scene is way too much all at once, but it seems they wanted to make a hard break here between the prologue on Shion's home planet and the rest of the game. The important thing we learn here is that Shoko's dad still has his memories, but he explains to Shoko that he had to kill Shion's father, since he was getting in the way of his grand objective. The scene is interrupted when yet another character boards the ship. You can see how this is really way too much all at once. This new character is a half-human, half-Zolian named Verda Mulets. I guess you can pronounce it Mullets if you want. Does she have a mullet? Anyway, Verda tries to stop Shoko's father, but he gets away. In the process though, he ends up killing Cal. Oh no, not Cal! You monsters! Verda takes the party to the space station of the galactic military she works for, known as Cosmic Hawk, where they kind of just get swept into enlisting. Shoko whispers, "Hey, wait a second, Shion." And I agree. I thought we were going to go look for Shion's mom, but Shion and Joe decide it's best to just go with the flow here. Verda is assigned with keeping an eye on the new recruits, and Shion and Shoko change over to their more adult-looking avatars with their Cosmic Hawk uniforms. So if you have a thing for anime girls with glasses, I'm afraid you're not going to get your fix for the rest of the game. We're assigned to a drug bust that has nothing to do with the main story, and finally we're allowed to roam freely about the galaxy and the Atlaya. Of course, this isn't exactly an accurate representation of outer space. None of the planets move, and it doesn't take hundreds or thousands of years to travel between solar systems. Still, it actually does take a really long time for a game. Am I actually getting anywhere? There's a space map you can bring up anytime to figure out which solar system the planet you're headed to is located in. And when you get close to your destination solar system, it's really hard to actually find anything. The map doesn't show your location very precisely, so you've got to just fly around nearby, hoping that a planet will eventually show up on the radar. Things become much easier later in the game when you unlock fast travel. When you're busy trying to get to your destination, you might get attacked by another ship. It's pretty cool that the game turns into an overhead view action game for the space battles. They're generally pretty easy, but things are a bit harder if you leave auto battle turned on, since the game sucks at playing itself. You have to change to manual control at the beginning of each battle. Furthermore, once you get a fighter unit to help you fight, you have to launch it manually each time. The battles control exactly how they look, and the strategy is generally to get close and keep firing, without colliding with the enemy ship. Sometimes if you can get going diagonally and just release the D-pad, you'll be going the perfect speed to quickly take them down. It may look like the Atlaya is getting its ass kicked here, but if you look at the numbers, this is actually good. After each battle, every character also gets experience, and the space battles are the fastest way to earn scrap. Scrap is what you need so that Joe can create new equipment for the party and the ship. In the later parts of the game, you'll generally never need to buy equipment, instead having Joe make it for you, as he levels up and becomes able to make better and better items from scrap. There are also scrap shops in most of the towns where you can exchange scrap for credits and vice versa.
Credits will do fine.
No, they won't.
Credits will do fine.
No, they won't.
Incidentally, this can apparently be exploited by buying certain items, having Joe scrap them, and then selling the scrap for more credits than you originally paid for the item. You can land the Atlaya on any planet you want, but of course if it's not somewhere you're supposed to go yet, something will either stop you or the random battles will just kill you instantly. So while you technically can go anywhere you want in the galaxy, there is a very linear game progression that you have to follow. Also, the overworld maps repeat in all directions, since they're planets, and are actually quite small, all things considered, so don't get too excited. The game's world is quite large for sure for 1991, but it isn't quite as vast as it may initially appear. So after a couple of missions that don't relate to the main story, our commanding officer says that we've earned a break, and suggests maybe visiting the human character's home planet, Mars. Mars! Finally we can search for Shion's mom.
Now this is the plan. Get your ass to Mars.
However, during our sabbatical, we're not allowed to use the Atlaya, and will instead have to use the spaceports. At an underground bar on Mars, we get a video letter left by Shion's mom. It says that she has suddenly gained the ability to see the future, and she knew exactly when they would visit that bar. She's waiting for them at a village on Mars, but it's on another continent with no clear way to get there. We'll have to buy our first small vehicle of the game, a hovercraft that can travel over the water. The vehicles offer yet another way to do battle in this game. Generally, the vehicles can take more damage than the human characters and offer some pretty heavy artillery. Later on in the game, Joe will become able to craft tanks that you can even bring with you on the Atlaya. Don't ever forget to bring your tank back to the Atlaya, by the way. You may never get it back. Oh, and you might also want to be a little careful about where you park these vehicles. It didn't take me long to get my first one permanently stuck in a mountain, with no way to get it out other than loading an earlier game save. Now we finally catch up with Shion's mom, and I'm afraid it's spoiler time. And when deciding whether or not to watch, keep in mind that there are currently no English patches available for any version of this game. Shion's mom explains that when the meteorite fell at the beginning of the game, she became one with an alien life form of pure energy called a Ralua, which has no body of its own, and has to inhabit the body of another being in order to interact with the physical world. So now, while she is still Lucia Asmarn, she is also a Ralua named Alshark. Isn't it funny to realize that the game is named after the protagonist's mom? Kind of. I always assumed that Alshark was the name of their ship or one of their vehicles. Look out, here comes the Alshark. Shion's mom further explains that there is also an evil counterpart to the Ralua, known as the Karma, who want to destroy the universe. And in case you haven't figured it out yet, it was a Karma that possessed Shoko's father. Shion's mother Lucia joins the party, and we have to seek out the very first human who colonized Mars, named Wei Dumna, because he was the only one who knew a way to stop the Karma. Shion obtains Dumna's cape for a final change to his appearance, and he also meets an AI version of Dumna's memories, telling him to seek out Dumna's disciple, who was a Woolian, which is one of the 4 races of beings I haven't mentioned yet. Unfortunately, since the Woolians are at war with the Zolians, there are no flights heading to their solar system from the spaceports. So Verda, who was at first skeptical, but now finally believes all of this is real, suggests that they steal the Atlaya from Cosmic Hawk. It's kind of silly having to steal a ship that was Joe's in the first place, but that's exactly what they do. From then on, if we try to land at any of the Mars-controlled planets, the party will be immediately apprehended by Cosmic Hawk, and it's game over. And this is a special game over screen where you have to reset the system to get out. The Woolian system is the first place where I really had to do a lot of grinding before I could stand a chance against the enemies at all. If there's one real downside to playing Alshark, it would have to be how grindy the game becomes at several points, especially during the second half of the game. Even by old school RPG standards, it's a lot. Seriously, every time I thought I had over-prepared myself and would never have to grind again, it was only a matter of time before more grinding became necessary. The party is surprised to find Dumna's disciple still alive after 300 years, which is apparently a long time to live even for a Woolian. He decides to tell the party the dark truth about the Ralua and the humans, though Shion's mom/Alshark urges him not to. The Ralua need to possess other beings in order to interact with the physical world, right? Well, it turns out that the humans were created by the Ralua for the sole purpose of serving as their hosts. Yep. However, one human, Dumna, had a particularly strong will of his own and managed to escape from the Ralua and set up a colony on Mars, which is the origin of the human characters in the game. Despite all of this, the Ralua aren't the bad guys. The Karma are the ones who want to destroy the universe, and the Ralua are trying to stop them. The Zolian Empire are under the control of the Karma, and defeating the Empire means defeating the Karma. Domna's ultimate technique was a skill that traps the Karma into the current body they inhabit, so that they will die when the host is killed. Shion has to use this special technique at least once when doing battles with any character possessed by the Karma, including these 2 Zolians shown in the opening, as well as the final boss, Jagma. The first character Shion uses it on, though, is Shoko's father, but instead of killing him with the Karma inside, Alshark sacrifices herself, somehow removing the Karma from his body, but also killing the body of Shion's mom. The spirit of Shion's mom, though, lives on inside Shion's cape. Not Alshark, the game explains, but Shion's real mom. The cape will talk to Shion and guide him throughout the rest of the game, in a voice that only he can hear. Shoko's father then joins the party, only to be replaced shortly after by a masked man named Duke Guidel, who is the strongest warrior serving under the king of Wulia, and has already saved the party on a couple of occasions by this point. This character absolutely kicks ass, but we won't get to keep him for very long either. On a mission where the party boards the Golian mothership, Joel realizes that unfortunately the fuse on their time bomb has been broken, and that someone needs to stay behind and detonate it manually. Guess who volunteers? Joe accidentally calls Shion's father by his real name, since he knew the truth all along. It's too late for Shion to stop his father as he says goodbye. Shion's mother, talking through the cape, convinces Shion to evacuate the ship and not let his father's sacrifice be in vain. And that's the end of that. It is never explained, however, how Shion's father managed to survive being killed by Shoko's father at the beginning. The vacant character slot is filled soon after by Super Cal. Joe had kept Cal's memory chip, and has now built him a new and improved body. This will be the final party until the end of the game. And if you play this game and wonder why Super Cal never levels up, that's because you have to manually level him up using one of Joe's special techniques once Super Cal has obtained enough experience. Try using the same technique on Verda throughout the game too, in order to level up her cybernetic arm. Verda gets her share of backstory and character development too. As she opens up to the party, she explains how she was given cybernetic implants by the military at a young age. The game insert explains that she's the daughter of a Zolian soldier and a human call girl who died giving birth to her. We do meet her father briefly near the end of the game. Since she's half Zolian, she can be controlled by a Zolian mind wave, which is used to stop Zolians from betraying the Empire. Of course, the party has to eventually find a way around that. Like in many RPGs, late in the game the party will obtain some rare ore, and you'll have to choose which piece of ultimate equipment you want Joe to craft from it. I recommend Shion's shield, but if you can't decide, simply fill your inventory to the max so that you can't carry any new items before talking to Joe. Then if you make space in your inventory before talking to him again, he'll get stuck in an infinite loop where he keeps building you new ultimate equipment. Save and load your game to get out of the loop. I decided not to cheat and only used Shion's shield, but I did have some fun messing with all this ultimate equipment after finishing the game. Oh yeah, let's finish the game now. The later parts have you obtaining 3 keys, which then can be used on the shield generators on 3 different planets, in order to bring down the shield protecting the final Zolian planet.
What's the combination?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
That's amazing. I've got the same combination on my luggage.
The final dungeon has some really difficult enemies that kept killing me, and I barely managed to make my way through by saving and loading. I was expecting Jagma to be an extremely difficult boss, just like the other recent bosses in the game, which had required me to do tons of leveling. But instead, he could hardly damage my party at all, and I beat him on my first try. I was definitely expecting a second phase, but this turned out to be one of those second phases that sort of plays out in the ending cutscene. Instead of dying with Jagma, the karma that inhabited his body breaks free and physically attacks the party, destroying Verda's arm. Shion's mom, talking through the cape, tells Shion that it is this room that is giving him his power, and tells him to destroy the ceiling, which Shion does with his lightsaber, or whatever. And that's it, the Zolian Empire and the Karma have been defeated. Shoko's father contacts the party to tell them that he has been assigned to replace the corrupt chief officer of Cosmic Hawk, and so the party is off the hook for stealing the Atlaya and can return to base. The game ends, saying that Shion knows that this is only the prelude to a much larger conflict, before rolling the credits. Sorry, but this game was way too long to be called only the prelude to anything, though I, for one, would have loved to see a sequel to Alshark. To access the Alshark music library, simply boot the ending disc. The fun pixel art throughout this sound test reminds me a lot of the Emerald Dragon music disc, but the good thing here is that it's actually included with the game. The X68000 version adds an entire additional opening sequence, which introduces the galaxy and the 4 races of humanoid beings who inhabit it. On one hand, this feels a little bit to me like over-explaining things, but on the other, Alshark's world is complicated, and any additional help the game can give is probably a good thing. The original opening sequence comes after, and it too has been expanded a bit. The gameplay graphics look a little different from the original, and overall this version plays very smoothly as well. Luckily, all the game save issues have been fixed in this one. There is of course a whole new arrangement of the soundtrack using the X68000 stereo FM sound chip, which most players will probably prefer. But if that's still not your thing, the X68000 version also adds LA MIDI support. The FM Towns version was the first CD-ROM version of the game, and thus it adds some CD-arranged music, including a hard rock version of the opening. There are some voices added, but only in the cutscenes.
何あれ連邦軍の船かしら
The graphics and gameplay are basically just the PC-98 version again. Even the weird refresh issue after saving your game is back. Still, I did notice a new graphic here and there. The Sega Mega CD version was the first port that wasn't done by Right Stuff themselves. It has pretty much its own new version of the opening sequence, with even a very short pre-rendered portion. The new additional opening that was added for the X68000 and FM Towns versions is completely gone though. This version has its very own arranged soundtrack, which differs from the FM Towns version, and is the best arrangement of the soundtrack in my opinion. Even a few other tracks in the game have this same sort of hard rock sound. This version also has a different voice cast, and the voice of Cal really sticks out since he's played by the same voice actress as Crayon Shin-chan, and is basically just doing the Crayon Shin-chan voice here. There are also some added cutscenes. For instance, the first cutscene is extended to include the death of Shion's father. Graphically, this one keeps the original HUD and has about the same viewing area for the gameplay as the PC versions, which means they had to make the character graphics very simple and pixelated. There's also a surprising amount of slowdown in some areas. Guess they needed to use more blast processing. Overall, this is a very worthy version of the game for a system that could always use a few more good RPGs. Play this version if the soundtrack is the most important thing to you. The final version of Alshark was the other console version on the PC Engine. This version also wasn't done by Right Stuff, even though Right Stuff developed a lot of their own games for this system. However, the developers here seem to have cooperated a bit more with Right Stuff, and it's thus more similar to the FM Towns version. It keeps the added opening sequence and uses the same arranged music. It also has the same voice cast, but with a huge amount of added dialogue. It also has its very own newly added cutscenes, which are completely different from the Mega CDs. This is the first version to add a much needed cutscene for that confusing part where they first get into space and encounter Shoko's father. This version gets rid of the HUD and has completely redrawn graphics to suit the PC Engine. This is probably what they should have done for the Mega CD version too. Still, the slowdown is comparable to the Mega CD version, and I also find the colors used throughout much of the game to be pretty ugly. Just the overall presentation here needs some work. Some of the music is missing, and the chiptune battle BGM really makes me want to turn the game off. Just compare it to the Mega CD version. Which one would you rather play? The biggest advantage of the PC Engine version, though, has got to be the greatly reduced difficulty. I had no problem breezing through the earlier sections of the game, and apparently it remains that way throughout. The dungeons and world maps have also been greatly simplified. Even the battle encounter rate has been very noticeably reduced. So even though this version does have a lot of problems, I would probably overall have to recommend this one for most casual players who just want to enjoy the story. But if you don't mind a lot of grinding, go ahead and take your pick from any of the other versions. They all have their good points. Not just by 1991 standards, but even today, Alshark is a truly epic RPG, spanning a galaxy. I can't possibly convey the true length of this game through this video, since of course I had to omit a ton of less important scenarios in order to keep this video from becoming even longer than it already is. Alshark is, unfortunately, not for everyone though. It's not an easy RPG, and the amount of time it asks of you for grinding is more than most will be willing to spare. In fact, it's due to the sheer length of this game that I wasn't able to release this video as early as I had originally hoped. Still, I have overwhelmingly positive feelings about Alshark. While the parts where I had to grind in the tank definitely got old, when I could grind using Shion's multiple enemy attack, I actually had a pretty good time. Alshark's battle system is overall pretty good at keeping things interesting. And though I would have liked to see more cutscenes, the story was truly amazing. While influences from other sources like Star Wars and Phantasy Star are pretty obvious, the plot actually had some twists that I genuinely didn't see coming. While navigating the menus is going to create a pretty firm language barrier for most with this one, I would say that if you ever find a way to play any version of Alshark, do it. And so, if you learned anything from this video, it should be that Alshark is a game about a shark. A shark named Al. That is all. Thanks for watching this episode of PC-98 Paradise. I had a great time making this one, and it's thanks to these patrons and members on your screen, as well as viewers like you. I'll be back with something else again soon, so stay tuned until then.